I am going to die. At some point, I will take my last drink. I will eat my last food. I will stare at my last sunset. In 20 years, very few people will remember me. In 50 years, I will probably be a distant memory. There are human beings who've been alive who I have no knowledge of whatsoever. The vast majority of humanity who is to come will have no knowledge of me. Do you know what? I'm absolutely fine with that. I have no fear about it. I have no existential dread about it. I accept it. But I'm really interested in those people who don't. I'm interested in those people who believe that there is an eternal afterlife. I'm interested in those people who think they'll be going to heaven to kiss God's toes and make him a very happy man. I'm interested in those people who think that they will be reborn again and again and again in some endless cycle until enlightenment is eventually achieved and a release from that rebirth comes. If you are one of these people who thinks that there is utility in believing in an eternal you, please give us a call because the show is about to begin. Welcome. Hello, everybody. Today is November the 17th, 2024. I'm your host, Richard Gilliver, and joining me today is the very, very wonderful Godless Engineer. How are you, Godless Engineer?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here, excited to take calls today, and just in general, just doing great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. It's I've just done the pre-show TikTok, and I was encouraging people to call from there. And it's very rare that we get two people on the show who are kind of so into the scholarship of religion. So, and we're coming at it from different angles. You know, my background's in Buddhism. I have had a look at Christianity a little bit and Islam a little bit. John, you're more in the Christian end of things, but it really gives people a great perspective. If you are a believer in the afterlife, or if you're a religious person from any tradition, and you really are convinced and you think the scholarship is convincing for your position, today is the day you need to call and give us a call, because, you know, you are talking to the two people here who are really, really on the same wavelength as you. So are you excited about this, John?
Oh, definitely. I'm always excited to interact with people, like, about the stuff I think about, I guess, especially when it comes to like religious scholarship and scholarship on like Christian origins and things of that nature. I know the chat poll is actually on slavery, which is another interesting aspect, because that plays a lot into the scholarship concerning Christianity and like how we interpret like the scriptures and all this other stuff. And so like there's a lot of different I guess avenues that we could go down on that particular topic.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting one, I think. And we've already got calls queuing up, which is always exciting. It's great to have those calls coming early so we can give those callers the time they deserve when they're calling into the show. But let's get the legal stuff out of the way first. Talk Heathen is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization which is dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. Talk Heathen is a live calling show, and we have open lines. So get your calls in at 512-991-9242 or from your computer at tiny.cc/callth. And as I say, those phone lines are filling up. So if you do want to talk to us, if you want to get in on this show where you've got myself and John hosting together, really now is the time to do it. Get your call in quickly so we can give you the time that you deserve. Before we take calls, we do our weekly segment, Talk Heathen to Me, and last week we asked you, it was a petty move when God blank And here are our top 3 answers. Number 3, Colin Matz. It was a petty move when God psyched Abraham. John, what do you think of that one?
Yeah, that's honestly an interesting story, and has a funny little mirror, in the Newer Testament. So that's definitely a funny prank right there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a strong prank, I think, maybe a strong word for that. Miranda, really bad abuse, maybe another way of phrasing it. Miranda Rensberger says, creating an entire universe just because you want to be worshipped is petty as fuck. I absolutely agree, John.
So sorry, I've got a insulin pod problem that's happening to me right now. It's causing a loud beep. But yes, I think that creating an entire universe just because you want to be worshipped is pretty petty.
Yeah. Number 1 is X Million, who says it was petty for God to demand foreskin sacrifice. The things that Christians have done around that. John, from your perspective, because I've got some cool stuff to talk about on there, but foreskin sacrifice, yay or nay?
Nay, I definitely do not vote for that particular thing at all. Nope.
Yeah, there are some. If you have a look at particularly medieval history, there were lots of stories of Jesus foreskins in history. And I say foreskins because there have been numerous ones claimed to be the foreskin throughout history. There was one particular lady saint in the Christian tradition, whose name I forget off the top of my head, but she had a penchant for sucking on these foreskins. I don't know whether she thought it would give her some kind of magical Jesus power or what, but go and look the foreskin stories up. You might want to be careful how you phrase it when you're doing the Google search for that, but go and look up those foreskins stories from the Middle Ages. There are some humdingers out there. There really, really are.
Sorry, I was just gonna say there are some really crazy foreskin stories like going up through history, to the point where people actually thought that they had the foreskin of Jesus that they used as a ring. If I remember correctly, when my wife and I took a trip out to Italy last year, she looked up some interesting history, and there was actually a rumor of one person actually using Jesus's foreskin as a ring. So that was quite interesting.
Yeah, as I said, there are many of Jesus' foreskins throughout history. I don't know whether maybe there were just 3. Maybe he's got 3 having the Trinity. Maybe, I don't know. Go and have a look. I'm talking shit now. The prompt for next week is, without lying, market the Bible to drive sales. Enter your best answer below the video in the comments, and next week we will reveal the top 3 answers. But of course, we don't let the guest get off scot-free as usual. So I'm going to ask the co-host, without lying, market the Bible to drive sales. Do you have an answer for that one?
Oh, yeah, yes. I'm so sorry. I do. I actually, I wrote it down. So 1 second. Okay. So without lying, market the Bible. So listen, do you want a DIY morality handbook? I'm sure that you do. I know that I do. And so you can pick and choose your ethics as long as you get this magical book called the Bible. You can love your neighbor, or you can stone them to death for like literally no reason at all. It's all in there. You can customize your values based on your mood or your political affiliation, either one. Get the Bible today.
That's great. That you know what? I think after that we should have a Bible in every classroom. Not jokes. What? Don't stone me.
Ryan Walters here in Oklahoma is not taking that lightly. Okay, he's going to force you to do it.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that. So we don't do this on our own. Of course, we have a great team behind us. Some wonderful people, mostly. Not mentioning any names, Greg. So there we go. Look at those lovely people. They're the ones who make it happen. We just turn up here and talk shit. Not gonna lie, that's all we do. We have. I'm looking forward to the calls today. I'm looking forward to working with Godless Engineer. I am pumped, and I also got to meet Jamie the Blind Limey in real life last week. He came over and we had a few drinks and a meal together. So I'm on a Talk Heathen high. I really, really am. I love this show. I love doing this show, and I think it's time we got in to those calls. We have Matt from Illinois, who is a church organist and wants to know how to talk to a pastor about their response to the threat of Christian nationalism. Matt, hello. Thanks for calling the show.
Hi, Richard. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Let's get into it. You want to know how to talk to your pastor about their response to the threat of Christian nationalism. Give us an outline of kind of what are you thinking. I'm going to let Godless Engineer jump in because I'm sure he's got more of a ball in this game than I have been over there with you. And let's see where it goes.
Excellent. So, yes, I have been a lifelong atheist, basically, and I've been a church organist sort of just due to a set of circumstances where I took a job a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago. And I can tell you guys that I have been offsetting the sort of mixed feelings I have about doing the job to begin with by listening to Talk Heathen on my trips to and from work when I do that. So I've appreciated that, but I've just felt that lately, especially in the last couple of weeks, as I pay attention to sermons, I feel like there's just, and this is a Lutheran, ELCA Lutheran church, and they're very nice people. I really, really adore them. And it's more of a sort of a community thing than it is a hyper-religious organization. But in light of events of the last year or so, it just seems like this very, very nice pastor has to play this sort of, there's good people on both sides type of an argument when world events are going on. And I think I've calmed down since a week ago, but in these last couple of weeks, are just things I see in the sermons. Today was talking about apocalyptic preaching, and had a similar kind of bent to it, of speaking like, hey, this is all a bunch of nonsense that some people think this, people have thought this for years, kind of debunking it. And then at the same time, using that as a springboard to then talk about how much God loves us. So that's kind of where I'm at. It's not the biggest emergency. I'm not going to quit tomorrow. I do like these people quite a bit, but at the same time, I feel like it weighs on me. I don't want to just ambush anybody out of nowhere if I were to have a conversation.
Right. So are you specifically asking, like, how do you talk about like the Christian nationalist feel that you have without like causing some kind of like massive emotional reaction from anybody that you're talking to? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, or myself included. I don't want to just come out to people in this community and kind of put them in that position. I'm not that confrontational a person, but I kind of am concerned that if I broach the subject at all and kind of say, hey, listen, where would I start? Because I could easily start with just any number of things that really irk me about Christianity to begin with, that I don't accept. And I don't want to put anyone in a position where they feel like they need to legitimately convert me either.
Right. I mean, it's kind of context dependent, like whatever's being talked about. Like if somebody's saying, oh, well, there's, good people on both sides or whatnot. I'm like, typically how I address it is like, yeah, maybe that can be true, but I mean, the two sides that we're talking about here are like, one is, seeking to make sure that, everybody has equal treatment under the law. They're seeking to make sure that people are taken care of, when they can't necessarily do it for themselves, and alleviating a lot of the financial ills of the lower and middle class. And then the other side just wants to milk the working class and the lower class for all that they're worth. They're wanting to destroy the economy and all this other stuff. And that's even on top of all the social issues that this side has, and persecuting minorities and all this other stuff. So I mean, like, sure, maybe there's good people on both sides, but the topics that we're actually talking about here are not like a both sides kind of issue. Like it's a very clear decision between both sides. And I would think that if you're truly wanting to embody what most people think of as the Christian ethics, I guess, or the Christian way of life, I feel like you would want to err on the side of the non-conservatives. I mean, there are several different passages you could think of in the Gospels alone that portray Jesus as this woke person that doesn't care about like monetary value of things in their life, and they care. Jesus cares way more about providing, social safety nets for the lower and middle class people. While at the same time not like bucking your responsibilities to like pay your taxes and stuff. I feel like it's Christian nationalism at its heart seeks to twist what people have become to associate as the Christian narrative. They're twisting it into this whole conservative type of mindset, thereby weaponizing their religion against them to make them understand like that kind of rhetoric as being purely like basically being a conservative Jesus, when in reality you could easily portray Jesus as being like one of those woke leftists. It's really kind of weird, and it's very contextually sensitive as far as like what you're wanting to talk about. So like, I don't know, maybe if you could give me like one or two more topics that you feel like you want to talk about with, people in your congregation or people in your life in general. And I can tell you how I might tackle it, but that would purely just be like how I would handle those conversations.
Yeah, I think the thing that keeps coming back to me in my head when I envision this conversation happening is just that I would start a sentence with how do I reconcile, and then blank, and that that these are almost fantasy conversations that I have, because I guess, and this is the maybe the thing I'm realizing as we're talking is that it's there is a fear of sort of othering myself, and I feel like there's I increasingly I'm the one who's very acutely aware that I see myself as sort of apart from a congregation, and I guess that makes me feel shy about asking any questions about theology, because I'm going to expose myself in some way too. So yeah.
Well, okay, so. Oh, I'm sorry. You go ahead, Richard.
I was just going to say that can be quite difficult a position to be in. I've been in the position where I've been a guest at mosques, at churches, Buddhist monasteries, and you have this. I host this show, and I've been doing this shit for decades and decades, and I have always this kind of urge to go out and challenge these people head on and like really grab them and shake them by the collar and say, let's have this conversation. You can't always do that. It's not always appropriate to do that. And I think if you're friends with these people, you take it, as John said, on an individual basis, how these conversations run. And I think making yourself available is a really good way to do that, to say, I don't necessarily agree with you on all this stuff. If you ever want to have that discussion, my door is open. Come to me, and I'm more than happy to talk about that with you. I think one thing we should avoid doing, and this is me speaking from experience, in those kinds of situation is putting yourself forward as kind of not necessarily aggressive, but as being pushy to try and say, well, you know, why do you believe this? Why do you believe that? Let's talk about it. Let's, you know, that's not necessarily the best way of going about having these conversations when you're doing it with your friends, you're doing it with your peers, you're doing it in an environment that you enjoy being in. You know, you want to keep those relationships, you know, open. I've just literally, I'm not making this up. I was just saying before the show to Kelly, who's backup host and Godless Engineer, I'm in a band. I'm in a jazz band, jazz, and the drummer in that band. I found out this week, too, Richard. Yeah. I found out this week that the drummer for that band is a very new band. We've only met a couple of times, and it transpires that the drummer actually trains priests to be priests. And we had a brief conversation about, you know, just different aspects of things, nothing too heavy, you know, just saying, you know, we were talking mostly about religious scholarship. And, you know, that has opened a door now for any future conversations that guy wants to have. He knows I'm interested in the subject. He knows that if he raises it, I'm happy to talk about it. And where that goes in the future, we don't know. It will, you know, what transpires will transpire from that. But the door is open. And it, you know, I didn't approach him. I was just saying that I'd not learned, I'd been lazy. I'd not learned a couple of songs because I'd actually been writing a paper about religious scholarship. And I just said, off the cuff, you know, I've not learned this song because I've been writing this paper. And he said, oh, that's very interesting. My job is training priests. It was as simple as that. But it has opened the door for kind of future dialogue. And I think that's the way, for me, that's the way that's always been the best approach. Just be open, not force it on anyone. Let people understand that you are there and you are interested if they want to have those conversations. But don't jump down the throats, because inevitably, if you jump down someone's throat with it, they're going to back off and they're not going to want to talk to you, especially in that environment when you're there week after week and you're talking to them consistently. It can cause problems for really wider relationships as well. So I'd be very cautious about that.
Yeah, I agree. I think this, you know, this is coming from a lot of time lately being feeling outnumbered, and I think I needed to call some atheists and talk it out, and not just have the turning wheels of my brain going about it, because I do feel like I've been pure enough in my atheism for long enough that it actually, aside from the many ways that it makes me angry, in reality, in real one-on-one conversations, it's not something that I can't weather if it's you know, launched at me, and also I don't need to be aggressive with it.
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest being aggressive with it. And I think that, you know, there's also the fact that, you know, when we started the show, I had to provide, you know, that sort of selling the Bible without lying about it. And I mean, I was genuine when I said that you could do like a DIY sort of ethics, you know, foundation, you know, using the Bible. You can literally justify any position that you want to using the Bible in various ways. So like if you wanted to ease into the conversation, like for instance, if somebody's talking about, you know, being pro-choice or being pro-life or whatnot, and you wanted to bring up scriptures in the Bible, there's actually more scriptures in the Bible that support life beginning at first breath rather than at conception. And you actually have to sort of twist the Bible's words about, you know, certain verses about, you know, God knowing somebody at the moment of conception and all this other stuff, when in actuality, at every point, life is not acknowledged until the breath of life has entered into you. And that is something that's given by God. And so like you could go that route, talking about those particular topics. With the social safety nets topics, you could also go the route, using the Gospels and the social safety nets. You could talk about how, Jesus was there to provide for the lower and middle income families. And he regularly spoke against the richest 1% and, how they valued money and all this other stuff. You could bring up that whole camel through a camel through the eye of a needle sort of thing. There's that the diversity of genders that we understand now about human sexuality. There's this one verse, I believe it's maybe Matthew 19 or something. It's in one of the Gospels where Jesus and his bros are compared to eunuchs, and Jesus speaks favorably about eunuchs and speaks favorably about abstinence and all this other stuff. And, you could definitely use that as an argument for the LGBTQ plus community because of how eunuchs were treated at that time. They were, well regarded at that point in time, and they were also not as gender binary. Like they didn't strictly adhere to a gender binary, and Jesus seemed to be pretty fine with them. So like for a lot of these social issues that you're talking about, you can definitely find scriptural verses that you can bring to the table and at least get them to think along the lines that they are willing to accept, as opposed to like directly coming out and challenging like, why should we believe in this nearly 2,000-year-old book that has chattel slavery and sexual slavery and all these other different things that it endorses and has God endorsing, and that we shouldn't necessarily take as good a good moral foundation to build upon. So I mean, like there's definitely ways in which you can attack it without directly offending their sensibilities.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I certainly have things to offer, conversationally without ever even going there. I think I'm just really acutely aware of my inner monologue, and I feel that little fear of being exposed, even though that's not much of a threat. They're very good. Yeah, I mean, really.
There's nothing wrong with having in a monologue. I defy anybody who listens to these calls, and I know this because I've done this before I was a host, and then I've been hosting these things forever. But before I was a host, I used to do this as well. You listen to the shows and you sit there and you say, you answer the questions. And Kelly's doing it right now as the backup host. I can guarantee you. He's listening to these conversations and he's answering the questions in his mind as though he's actually having the conversation, saying, this is how I would respond to this. And I read the comments every week because I'm sad. I read the YouTube comments every week, and every week we get people saying, well, the host should have said this, and the host should have said that. And when you're a fucking host, you can say what you want, mate. But at the minute, I'm in this chair, and John's in this chair, so we're going to say what we're saying. And, voice your displeasure with it in the fucking comments, so I can just ignore you anyway. But anyway, that's an aside. I think just one last quick thing I would also maybe consider doing is when these, if they're having conversations and they're touching on subjects that you think you might not necessarily be comfortable to talking about, it might be worth just having a look and seeing what other Christians think about this and saying, well, there are other Christians who disagree with you on this subject. May I recommend you look at such and such? And because they have a different opinion to you on this, and that might give them, open their eyes that this isn't a Christian versus atheist kind of discussion. This is a wider discussion where people, even within their own faith, have different opinions to them. So it might open their eyes that, it might not be, you don't have to be a Christian and be conservative or an atheist and be liberal. The world isn't simply that black and white. There are lots of different spectrums on both sides of the argument. So maybe point them in the direction of people on their own side of the wall who disagree with them, and kind of say, go and have a look at what this person thinks, you know, have a think about it and come back and let's have a conversation about that, about the differences of opinion within Christianity. And sorry, go on, please.
Yeah, I would say overwhelmingly that my read of everyone seems to be something of wow, these are people who are all still learning quite a bit about, you know, that maybe that's some of where my trepidation comes from, because I can overhear conversations and certain things that people say where I'm like, and then my judgment comes in where I'm like, oh, if I know who wrote the Gospels or didn't write the Gospels, then, you know, but I can accept that for being something that it could be far worse. There could be far more dogmatic views that I'm hearing. These are just things that people are really intrigued, and they have a faith and they have an understanding of it, but that does seem to be open, and there are those discussions.
Yeah. Matt, I'm going to let you go shortly because we do have calls lining up. Thank you for calling, and thank you for your kind words about the show. I'm glad that, you know, we've been able to get you to think about these things and think about what you would say, and that, you know, that makes me happy. It really does give me the warm smileys inside to know that people are thinking about the show positively like that. But I do appreciate your call. Please call back and let us know how these conversations go if you do end up having them. I would love to follow your journey on this. And, you know, especially if you're talking to a range of different people and on a range of different subjects, I would love to follow your story on this. So please, Matt, give us a call back. I do appreciate you calling us. John, that was a great call to start off.
Yeah, I agree. And I do hope to hear how his conversations go. So totally interested in that.
Yeah, stay tuned for more exciting calls. As many of you know, we have, I'm not going to do that accent again. I apologize to all Americans, Canadians, or anyone who sounds vaguely like that, because you all sound the same to me. As many of you know, we have initiated phase 2 of our brick fundraiser. We want to highlight some of the standout orders we've received. This week's featured brick goes out to Joseph. They are always saying God loves us. If that's love, I'd rather have a bit of kindness. Thank you for your purchase, Joseph, and you too can get your brick at tiny.cc/ACA bricks. I'm not going to lie, I've had an idea for a brick for a long time, and I don't know whether they'd let me do it, so I've not put it forward. Because it's a bit naughty. So anyway, swiftly moving on, if we get $10, that's real US dollars, plus worth of super chats, Godless Engineer will channel the spirit of Jesus Christ into a puppet for the world to enjoy. That's $10 plus super chats. So if we get $100 in super chats, we are going to get John channeling Jesus. And I almost came over myself then, because I'm so excited about this happening. And of course, available on tiny.cc/ACA flyers are printable calling flyers. Post these with permission. Of course, we don't want anybody getting into trouble, to community bulletin boards so people know they should call our show and defend their faith. If you do post any flyers, make sure to snap a picture of it and place it in place and send it to tv@atheist-community.org, and we may feature your photo on an upcoming show. As always, we have merch. You can get your Talk Heathen merch at tiny.cc/merch-ACA, where you can get tees, hoodies, crop tops, hats, tumblers, mugs, all sorts of things. If you like one of our hosts, Sophia, who's just had a brand new little baby, you can get little baby clothes on there and everything. So you get yourself over there and proudly represent. And I will be very, very happy if I see. In fact, I will make this pledge now. If I see any person in real life, if I bump into any of you in real life, this largely apply to British fans of the show. But if I bump into you, in any of you, in real life, wearing Talk Heathen merch, I will personally buy you a second item of merchandise. I promise you, I will have a selfie with you. We will post it on the Talk Heathen Facebook page, and I will personally buy you a second item of merchandise and send it to you. So get representing, people, especially if you're over on my side of the pond. Like the video and subscribe to the channel, enable notifications, and comment below on your favorite caller. We have calls lining up. I'm going to take Dee, because I asked Dee to call in on this subject, and we love Dee on this show anyway. But I challenged a little bit something I heard Dee say to another couple of hosts a couple of weeks ago. So I wanted to just bring that up. Dee, hello, how are you?
Hi, Richard. Nice to talk to you again.
How are you? You sounded a
John,
bit trepidatious. I'm not going to fight you. Don't worry.
I just wanted to say, John, I'm really glad to finally talk to you as well.
Oh yeah, I'm glad that you called in today. So, what question did you have?
So I had a discussion with Sophia and Objectively Dan 2 or 3 weeks ago. Richard let me know that he kind of wanted to have a further discussion on that. So tell me what you want. Tell me what you want to know, Richard.
So I actually wanted to touch on two aspects of something you brought up in that call. Firstly, that you were a secular Buddhist, and Buddhism is my bag, baby. So I wanted to kind of go into that a little bit with you, but also, you know, you had this conversation with Sophia and Dan, and you were talking about people who were coming out of religion. And tell me if I'm misrepresenting you at any point here. This is how I understood it. And, you know, you were kind of saying we shouldn't kind of challenge them so hard because they're in a transitional phase. So they might have come out of an orthodox religion and be going through some kind of spiritual phase, still holding on to supernatural beliefs. And when they're in that stage, we shouldn't challenge people as hard. Am I on the right lines there?
Generally, yes.
Right. So this is kind of what my objection was to that, and you know, I'd love to hear your response to this. I don't know when I'm talking to somebody whether, you know, unless they specifically state I have come out of a religion and I now believe this. And even then, I do not know for certain that is a transitional phase. Somebody could have left mainstream religion. Somebody might have always held on to this supernatural belief. And I think making the assumption that it's a transitional stage is quite dangerous thing to do. And to say then, well, I'm not going to challenge this person as hard as I would if they were within religion. I think that's doing a disservice to kind of educating and education using critical thinking and skepticism and things. You know, I want people to have a better toolbox, regardless of whether they're in a transitional phase or what their beliefs are. You know, even if they don't believe in a God, but they believe in some kind of vague spirit, ghosts, things like that. I think those people still should be challenged on those beliefs. And in fact, in my experience, and I can only talk from my own experience here, I found much more pushback from people who hold those kind of vague supernatural beliefs than I have from people who hold on to kind of orthodox religious beliefs. I found people with orthodox religious beliefs are much more open to talk about it, whereas people with kind of vague supernatural beliefs tend to really, really kind of not want to have the conversation. They're kind of really reluctant to have the conversation. And I don't know whether that is because, you know, the kind of in a headspace where they kind of maybe know that it's all bullshit, but they don't really want to acknowledge that. So I'm going to ask you, as a person who is, you know, self-identified being in that space, is it possible that the reason you think that we should not be as hard on people in this transitional stage or who hold these beliefs, because you think within yourself that you might have to acknowledge that they are irrational?
You know what, Richard? You're absolutely right. I was speaking out of personal experience on several occasions. Having said that, I want to mention that I challenge myself almost daily, you know, when I come up or whenever those thoughts or feelings come up, I challenge myself.
Yeah.
And number one, you know, how important is it to me to believe it? And I shed a little bit every time I do that. I mainly wanted to talk about some of the things I've heard. I'm talking about people who aren't interested in educating so much as they are in having gotcha moments.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I probably wasn't very clear about that. I don't think that.
No, I appreciate. Dee, I really appreciate the clarification. I really, really do, because you know, I've you know, it's very. I'm probably one of the most vocal people on this in this space that I know of, but I have as many arguments with atheists as I do with theists on in these social media spaces, because you know, I'm all about kind of giving people better frameworks to think by, you know, better ways to assess what they believe. That's really what my bag is. And you know, atheists are as guilty of needing that as many theists are in a lot of respects. And you know, so I appreciate that clarification from you. I really, really do, because a lot of atheists are out there to give gotcha moments to people. So I completely understand where you're coming from on that. Having said that, I want to hear from John, because this isn't the Richard Gilliver show, it's the Talk Heathen, and we have two hosts on here. So I'm going to let John kind of take over for a while, give his opinion on the matter.
Yeah, so I mean, I generally am perceived to be like a pretty strong personality, and I generally come out strong. I usually try. I don't try to give any quarter, I guess, to somebody in a conversation, but that really is depending on the topic that's being discussed, you know, because if it's a conversation over like whether or not women should have bodily autonomy and they're basing their whole argument on God, I'm less likely to, you know, give somebody an easy time on that particular topic, as opposed to like a topic about Christian origins. Yeah. And so like it is very context sensitive for me as to when I'm more understanding and more accepting of people going through a transitional phase, either coming out of religion or whether they're still in religion and they're just questioning their beliefs. It really kind of depends. Like general conversation about God, you know, I'm going to be a lot easier on people. But if we're talking about God in a moral aspect, or like why, or like, you know, how you have to be a Christian or some kind of religious person in order to really be able to ground your morality, in reality. I feel like I'm less likely in those situations to be understanding of those things, because like my mind immediately goes to how immoral the Bible is and how that causes people on a number of different topics to just say horrible things, and they think that it's just normal, like it's because it's normalized to them, so they don't understand the depravity of what they're saying. And so I guess I feel like in the conversation, my goal is to really highlight the depravity of their statements. And if I have to be a little forceful or a little maybe bombastic or harsh, if you will, in that conversation in order to get them to understand the depravity of their statements, then I don't have a problem with doing that. I know on a call-in show recently, we were talking about sexual slavery in the Old Testament, how God commanded it and everything like that. And I phrased it in a very uncomfortable way because I was talking about how God commanded Israelite men to fuck children, because that's what it was. It was a grown-ass men that were, having sex with children. And so I phrased it in a very uncomfortable way for the caller. And so the caller was like, can we not talk about it in this kind of way? And so I just asked them, I was like, okay, in what way can we talk about fucking children that would placate your sensibilities? Because I feel like there's no way that we can talk about that particular subject and how that subject exists in the Bible in a way that's nice, in a way that makes them not feel icky about it, because it should make you feel icky. It should be a disgusting conversation to have. But the fact that somebody wants to make the conversation easier to have, I feel like it just shows how they don't actually want to talk about the harsh realities of the Bible. They just, they're used to the Bible giving them comfort and everything like that. And I totally agree. I totally understand that, not trying to take that away from anybody, but at the same time, you have to acknowledge these harsh realities that are portrayed in the Bible. And so I guess to bring this all back together, and so I can stop talking, is that, it depends on the context, and it depends on what topic is being discussed as to whether or not I'm harsh or if I'm more understanding. And so I think having a good gauge of that in the conversation you're having is key.
And I absolutely agree. I want to make it clear that my opinion was never that we shouldn't push back on the horrible shit that people say to defend their religion. That was never my position.
I think you've made that clear in previous calls as well, that you're quite happy to push back on horrendous things, and we appreciate that from you on this show.
Thank you. Well, thank you for allowing me to clarify and for giving me your thoughts. I really do agree with both of you, and I probably could have phrased it all a little better. But thank you. I appreciate that.
The more conversations we have, the better we get at having them. And, I'm aware that you're new to this space of having these conversations, and, you've always been a welcome caller. Before you go, I'm not letting you go. I'm not letting you off the hook that easily. I want to talk to you a little bit about secular Buddhism and what it means to you, because I never get a chance to talk about Buddhism on this show. So I'm going to, gosh darn it, grab it with both hands while I do have the opportunity. What does secular Buddhism mean to you, and how do you view Buddhism on the whole? Do you think secular Buddhism is a good representation of Buddhism on the whole?
Well, I think it is, because Gautama never claimed to be a supernatural being. He was just someone who had some really insightful, epiphanies or whatever, about how
I just feel I need to interrupt you at this point. Have you ever read the Buddhist scriptures?
I've read some, not a lot.
Yeah, I can tell you,
mostly
having a hard copy of the Tipitaka, which is the Buddhist equivalent of the Bible, if we want to simplify things to that extent, which is 11 times longer than the Christian Bible, roughly, give or take. There is plenty of supernatural stuff, both claimed by the Buddha and performed by the Buddha. He says that a monk who has achieved such a level of kind of insight, of power, of meditative prowess, can transport themselves through walls. He says that they can, he himself claims to have outstretched his arms and traveled to one of the Brahma heavens to talk to God. He claims to have the psychic powers of being able to read people's minds and see the future. He has all these mystical powers, all these supernatural powers that many people who kind of come to Buddhism from the Western or secular perspective, and I'm certainly not criticizing that, by the way, because, the secular perspective of looking at Buddhism is a legitimate way of looking at it. So I'm not saying that, you are not a true Buddhist by any stretch of the imagination. What I'm saying is there is a wider perspective, and in religious studies, and I was talking about this before the show with the other guys. When you've got a religion, whether you've got Christianity or Islam or Buddhism, what we say is that there are Buddhisms or Christianities, because you don't have the whole scope of a religion is so wide that you don't have a one size fits all kind of thing. And whereas secular Buddhism is perfectly legitimate to practice and not accept those supernatural beliefs, I don't accept the supernatural beliefs of Buddhism, and I've been practicing Buddhist meditation for over 20 years. So I certainly get it. I certainly do get it. But that is not to say that Buddhism or Buddhisms are devoid of those beliefs. And certainly if you're coming from a scriptural point of view, whether that's the Theravada, which is the kind of oldest school of Buddhism we have, or the Mahayana, which is the other major school of Buddhism, and Vajrayana, which is sometimes classed as a separate school, but it's a subset of Mahayana. All of those traditions contain significant supernatural elements when you're looking at the scripture. And the scripture, the Tipitaka, especially the section of it that deals with the Buddha's direct teachings and the teachings of his disciples, they contain lots and lots and lots of examples of the supernatural. So I would really, really encourage you to kind of go out and look at those scriptural references, to have a look at the wider perspective of Buddhism, and kind of just have a look and educate yourself, I guess, a little bit more on the religion as a whole, because I think you'll find some of the stuff in there very, very interesting.
Mostly what I have been reading are the Dalai Lama's books. Right now I'm trying to work my way through some teaching he's written on the Four Noble Truths.
Yeah.
The
Dalai Lama comes from the Mahayana school. Tibetan Buddhism is a subset of the Mahayana school. And, just to give you an example, and, it's a communicator. The Dalai Lama is a communicator for Buddhism to a largely Western audience. The West has been very good to him in Tibet's exile, Tibetan Buddhism's exile from Tibet into India and other places. And, he's, from being very, very young, he has developed a good relationship with the West and communicating Buddhist ideas to the West. What he doesn't necessarily do very clearly is put forward these, the more supernatural claims. I mean, in Tibetan Buddhism, for example, you have stupas, which they burn. I can't remember what plant it is, but it sends these fragrant, plumes of smoke into the skies. And, from the religion perspective, they are there to help people who have died and who are going to be reborn to kind of climb up into the heavens and achieve a good rebirth. And the Dalai Lama talks himself about, the Dalai Lama is supposed to be a reborn figure himself, a bodhisattva reborn from a figure called Avalokitesvara, or Kuan Yin, if you want the simpler name. That's another aspect of that figure he's supposed to have been born from.
Oh, really?
When a Tibetan monk is reborn, in fact, there's a film out from then, I think it's from the 90s, with starring Keanu Reeves. Now, I will warn you, because this is not.
I've seen
it's
that.
very unacceptable. This Keanu Reeves does do blackface in the film, so it's something to be aware of before watching it. But in that film actually talks about this reincarnation process that all the lamas go through, that all significantly high-ranked lamas go through, of demonstrating that they have been reborn, that they are the reincarnation of a particular figure. So when this current Dalai Lama dies, his successor will be chosen because they believe it is his. It's not a soul, because there is no soul in Buddhism, but the 5 khandhas, which are the things that are reborn in Buddhism, goes on into a new body. And when that body it comes to fruition and that child is born, they will put them to a test and give personal items of the current Dalai Lama to that child to see if he can pick out his items. And if he can do so, it will be called it will be announced as the reincarnation of the 14th current Dalai Lama and be announced the 15th Dalai Lama. So even though the Dalai Lama is a spokesperson for Buddhism, sorry, go on.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I saw that in a movie about the Dalai Lama, and I thought that was just Hollywood, but that's really what they do, huh?
That is the actual process that they go through of choosing, the next reincarnated Lama. But I'm going to leave you with that because we have lots of callers, and I will talk forever and a day on Buddhism if I get a chance to do so, which will probably not be a monologue. So, hit us up again, Dee. Let us know how you get on. But I do appreciate the call. I always enjoy it when people call up and want to talk to me directly about either something I've said or something I'm challenging them on personally. So I really, really do appreciate that. And we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
That was John. I know I kind of left you out a bit of that, but
no, that's perfectly fine. I was actually thinking the way that you were describing that reminds me of Avatar: The Last Airbender, how the air nomads were able to identify who the reincarnated avatar was. This is the exact same way that you were describing them picking out the I guess it's the next Dalai Lama. Is that that's who you were describing, right?
Any high-ranking dark lamas in Tibetan Buddhism tend to go through this same process. We have some super chats. We also I'm going to do some super chats, and we're going to read the patrons out, the top 5 patrons, and let's look at the super chats first. We have Miranda Rensberger, who has posted this twice. Very kindly, Miranda. You could have said something else, as well. Sent $10 saying November 20th is Transgender Day of Remembrance, a day to honor trans people who have lost their lives to violence or self-harm. Let's work against people using religion as an excuse for their hate. Absolutely, Miranda. I'm totally behind that. And in fact, not just religious people, because there are many, many non-religious people who have this weird fucking thing against trans people, which I don't get at all. Just go out and read the fucking science on it, people, please. Daniel Shower, I'm going to get this wrong because I always do with pronunciation, sent 1999, thank you for that, who said, I want to hear from Puppet Jesus. Well, maybe you will get to hear from Puppet Jesus. We just need a few more people to throw us some $10 super chats. And let's go down that route. We have the patrons. John, can you see those? Do you want to read those out?
Yeah, sure, I can. So top 5 patrons are Oops, All Singularity, Kalevi Helveti. Sorry, I'm terrible at pronouncing names on occasion, except for this next one. Dingleberry Jackson, Left in the Leaves, Brian Zupke, honorable mention number 6, and Paul Sherman.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. If you want to become a patron, you can. You can go to our Patreon at tiny.cc/PatreonTH. And on that note, we have started recording the Talk Heathen Discord after show for all levels of paid patrons. I'm going to be there today. John's going to be there today. And Kelly, our backup host, will also be there today. So you're going to get a lot of content out of that. So if you can't join us live, join the Patreon and you can get all of those recorded after shows. And sometimes we get some great insights. We get to see a little bit more into the hosts' kind of personal lives. And it's all there for you on that Patreon. For you to get. So I'm going to jump into another call. We have calls upon calls on calls. I'm going to take Stephen from Florida, who wondering why Islamophobia is called Islamophobia. Stephen, talk us through it. Talk us through what you're asking us.
Right. Like, I'm just wondering, like, Islam is the religion for the Muslim people. And so when people say transphobia or homophobe, they're talking about, you know, those groups of people. And so I don't understand why we call it Islamic phobia, because anybody who basically believes in separation of church and state would be an Islamic phobe, just the way they would be a Christian, Christianity phobe.
No, so as far as Islamophobia goes, Islamophobia is more about making generalized statements or conclusions about someone simply because they are Muslim, or you perceive them to be Muslim. So, like, if you automatically think that they're, a terrorist or something like that, just because they are Muslim, that would be a case of Islamophobia. Simply being for the separation of church and state is not any kind of phobia, because while we are afraid of, what would happen if religion takes over our government, that's not the main driving force behind it. And it's also, we're not also making these statements because of like vast generalizations about, religious people in general. It's about the mixture of state and religion that we're fighting against, because we already know what the problems are there. So there's a number of different nuances that we're talking about here when we're speaking about those things. I do think that just assuming somebody, if you do perceive them to be a Christian, assuming that they're homophobic or transphobic or racist or something like that is not warranted. So I would similarly speak out against that. But at the same time, I feel like if you dig down deep enough, like either the person, if they're not transphobic, homophobic, and racist as part of their as part of Christianity, then they're better than their own religion, because you can definitely use Christianity, the Christian scriptures, in order to justify all of those things. And they have been done in the past to justify those things. And so I feel like that just highlights how the person is way better than the religion that they claim to practice. And so, so to answer your question, Islamophobia is called Islamophobia because of the vast generalizations people make just because they perceive someone to be a Muslim, or they know about somebody being a Muslim. And so they automatically think some prejudicial things about them.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. It kind of makes no sense to say that. It would be like saying, like, I'm an atheist. Does that mean that you don't believe in Zeus? And then you'd be like, yeah, I don't believe in Zeus. But you're a Zeus phobiist. And you know what I mean? And you're like, well,
Well,
I'm in all God's phobias.
Hold on. Sorry to interrupt you, Stephen, but no, that is not anything that I just said. So what I said was making vast prejudicial generalizations about a person, and that and that affects how you treat that person and how you see that person. If I just simply say I don't believe in Zeus, that doesn't mean that I'm afraid of somebody that practices the ways of the Greek or Roman pantheon, which I believe in the Roman pantheon, Zeus is actually Jupiter. But in any case, however you want to portray that, it's not that I'm afraid of somebody that practices the Greek pantheon. I just don't believe in those gods. So there's a vast difference in our terminology here and how we're using these words.
Right. And that's what I was trying to say is, like, I just don't understand, like, Islamic phobia when they're talking about, like you said, they're like Muslim people. Wouldn't it be like Muslim phobia and not Islamic phobia? Because Islam is a religion. It's not a group of people, but it's a word that, like, Christian nationalists and Republicans use, like you said,
okay.
like,
So
for them being afraid of them.
Stephen, what religion do Muslims practice?
Islam.
Okay, if you are irrationally afraid of Muslims and you project your prejudices upon a person without actually knowing the content of their character or how they implement their understanding of Islam, does it really matter whether or not we call it Islamophobia or Muslimophobia? Muslamophobia, maybe? I mean, I don't really think the wording matters or what words we use. We're still using Islamophobia to describe it when somebody irrationally has a hatred or a fear of somebody that practices Islam. And I don't think that there's, like, I feel like you're pulling nut hairs off of a fly at this point.
No, I mean, I just wondered, you know, the terminology really and how it makes sense if you use a religion to, you know, codify a group of people. I believe, you know, everybody has a right to their own religion as long as it doesn't affect anybody else. Once it starts affecting other people, that's when it becomes a problem. So I just didn't understand why we call it that when that is the religion Stephen, that Muslims practice. That's
right. I get it. Stephen, can you attempt to steel man how I've explained Islamophobia so far in this call?
Can I what?
Do you know what the term steel man is? Steel man basically is where you try to present my argument to the best of your abilities as you understand it.
Oh, I wasn't presenting your arguments. I was asking a question. I don't know how you would make a steel man out of a question.
No. So I was asking you to try to steel man what I've told you in this particular conversation. So, like, as far as you understand what I've told you in this conversation, can you repeat back to me what I've clarified about Islamophobia?
Yeah, that it's basically a fear of Islam, of a group of people who would be associated with Islam.
Well, so a few key adjectives, I guess, maybe are missing here. That would be an irrational fear of, and a prejudicial generalizing of this group of people, to where you think that anybody that practices Islam would match, like, your worst ideas about them. So you automatically assume the worst ideas about them. That is a stark contrast from just, you know, not wanting a religion to infect our government or our way of life. Somebody can practice their religion as long as it doesn't negatively affect other people. That is not the same thing as, like, prejudicially generalizing somebody in a particular kind of mindset just because they practice a certain kind of religion.
So, I mean, since America is like 80% Christian, are we not Americans anymore? We're Christians. We're the Christians.
I don't understand the
Americans.
non sequitur here. That this is a non sequitur because I don't understand how we got from talking about Islamophobia to now how people aren't American.
Because it goes back into the same thing. It's more like special pleading one case. It's like saying if you don't believe in any gods, you could pick one of the 5,000 that have been created and been like, so you don't believe in this God. And it would only go that you don't believe in that God. So I'm just saying again, the Islamic.
Stephen, look, let's cut to the chase. Why does it matter whether we call it Muslimophobia or Islamophobia? The point is, and the important point is that the phobia is in there. So there are a group of people being, unfairly called out or treated or dismissed or whatever way you want to phrase it, because of the way they identify being a set of people who practice a certain religion. A Muslim is someone who practices Islam. So it doesn't. What does it matter? What you're calling it?
Kind of like Christians believing that there was a global flood. It is comical and it is funny.
No, it doesn't matter what they believe. 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 It's irrelevant what they believe, right? Why does what we call the term of them having unfair prejudice shoved their way? Why does that term itself, why is that the important aspect and not the fact that they're having this prejudice thrown their way? Why is that not the important part of this rather than what we call it? Isn't that the thing we should be addressing?
What are you asking?
The unfair prejudice against a group of people based solely on one aspect of their life. That's what we're talking about here. The unfair prejudice against a group of people.
And that's what I'm asking exactly. When we call it Islamic phobia and we're associating that with a group of Muslim people, we are associating them with the religion that they practice and not the group of people that they are. So that's what I'm saying, that Islamic phobia is already kind of a racist term.
Why call it Muslim phobia? What's the difference if we call it Muslim phobia? Because the thing that is the active ingredient, if you like, of what is happening is the same, regardless of whether we call it Islamic phobia, Muslim phobia, people who wear things on the head phobia, people who wear sandals in the desert phobia, people who choose not to drink alcohol because some big bad God says it phobia. It doesn't matter what we call it. The important part is that there is this phobia taking place. That is the important part of it. And this is what I think you're kind of missing. You're brushing this very, very important part aside to say, well, why are we calling it this instead of this? Well, who fucking cares what we call it? Let's address the actual issue. The actual issue at hand is that these people have been treated unfairly because of, this isn't defend a Muslim. This is Talk Heathen. But, when we get calls like this, I feel it's very, very important to say, we shouldn't be, mistreating people unfairly, being unfairly prejudiced against people because of an aspect of their lives in which they choose to identify. And it can go across the board. It doesn't have to be a religious person. We can pluck any person out of any minority group and say, well, this person is being unfairly treated because of this aspect of their life. What we call it is largely irrelevant. That we address that unfairness is the important part. It's what John's trying to get across to you. It's what I'm trying to get across to you. And you seem hung up on what it's called rather than the action of this unfair treatment.
Yeah, Stephen, I feel like you're trying to play an Uno reverse card and it's just not working out for you here, because I feel like what you're trying to do is trying to be like, oh, people that claim that others are Islamophobic are being racist themselves. And that just doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense to me. I feel like you're getting lost, like Richard was saying. I feel like you're kind of getting lost in terminology here, and you're not really focusing on the irrational generalizations that occur. Because, like, if you let's say if we can run through this real quick, there, Stephen. If you meet a person who says that they are a Muslim and their name is Muhammad, do you automatically think that they have like a bomb or something? Like, is that something that you would naturally think?
No, I don't think that. And I think you're irrational when
awesome.
you group.
No, awesome. So you do not adhere to Islamophobic tendencies. I commend you for that. It would be Islamophobic for you to automatically think that that person is on the way to commit a jihad or something. That would be Islamophobia. But if you meet a person who is a Muslim and be like, oh, okay, well, I don't believe in, your particular religion. I'm not part of your particular religion. Just don't believe in that. Do you understand the stark contrast that I've kind of highlighted here in one way is Islamophobic, the other way is not? Do you understand the difference?
I think you're a fat fuck.
Oh, yeah.
If at first you don't succeed, insult people because you have shit arguments.
Hey, listen, my name is Fat Fuck now, okay? That's my name.
I apologize for that, Godless Engineer. As a welcome guest on our show, I do not condone anyone calling any of the guests on this show such names, you piece of shit. Please don't ever call back again. Right. Well,
I mean, you've always gotten the upper hand in a conversation when they have to break down and be like, I think you're a fat fuck. Okay, that has nothing to do with what we were talking about, but bye.
Yeah, swiftly moving on. I am going to take, shall I take? Shall I do it? Shall I do it? Shall I do it? No, they can wait. I'm going to take Connor from Kentucky. What's the point of debating presups? Asks Connor. Connor, are you there?
So, I'm there. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I'm here. I guess I wanted to ask why. Okay, sorry. Let me figure out how to phrase this. I've watched a lot of videos from various sources like Talk Heathen, Atheist Experience, the whole shebang. And the thing I always get is, we get people on here who have the presuppositionalist, you can't have logic without God. And it always strikes me as odd to even continue the conversation past like 3 minutes because, and I'm sorry, I'm autistic, so maybe I'm just like missing a social cue somewhere, but is it not just axiology? Is it not just you have all the same axioms as me, but I have one more, which is God must exist. Like at that point, like you can't debate someone out of an axiom, right?
Yeah, I'm going to let the fat fuck take this first. And then I will come in afterwards. John, please take it away.
Yeah. So I mean, I can totally agree with that. That if you don't want to have conversations with presups, as soon as you identify them as a presup, I mean, I don't hold it against anybody to just throw their hands up and be like, okay, there's no point in having a conversation with you at all. But I typically like to have these kinds of conversations. And that's primarily just because I'm hoping to sort of pull them out of the presup mindset is what I generally want to try to do. And that's just by highlighting like the disconnection, between, what they're hoping to prove and what's actually being proved in the conversation. Because you're right, they just have to tack on one more axiom. But I mean, as we understand from like Occam's razor, the more ad hoc stuff that you have to tap onto or tack onto your argument, the weaker your argument becomes. And so I feel like highlighting that to them and being like, oh, well, that's just ad hoc stating that God is necessary for logic, or that's just ad hoc stating one thing or another, and trying to get them to justify it, that either highlights that, you know, they're dogmatically adhering to their position, or if they're actually trying to figure things out. And if they're actually trying to figure things out and they're just so happen to be convinced by this argument, maybe you can highlight the problems with the argument, and, you know, maybe they can become better for it, for the conversation that you have with them. But at the same time, I don't think that you should really stress yourself out over presuppositionalists, because you can basically run the same script on them because they always have the exact same script. And so like anytime you encounter one, you just run through the basic talking points. And if they're still not, listening to you, or they're still adhering to it, then, I mean, I would say just get out of the conversation and stop talking to them.
Yeah. So I guess when I say that, like I personally myself take it a point to not talk to presuppers for that exact reason. But I'll watch the show and I'll see, and I've actually watched a little bit of you, Godless Engineer. I don't think I've watched the other host. I'm not sure their name. I'm sorry. But I'll watch them, and the videos will be like 30 minutes long or longer, and it's. I guess I understand, like, if someone's coming in and they feel like they've been partially convinced, but I guess, like, frequent callers, I can't think of any names off the top of my head or whether that would be okay to name them, but just, like, you get frequent callers like like Darth Dawkins, calls in with the same shit every single time, and you're not going to change his fucking mind.
Yeah, look,
he goes like plenty of names.
I think this. No, I'm kidding. I have heard of him, unfortunately. I'm Richard, by the way. I think it's important, on the one hand, when we're on a call-in show, which is it's essentially what we're talking about here, or on a platform where you've got other people witnessing the conversation. I think it's very important to try and have those conversations if we can, if we're able to, because it highlights, as Godless Engineer was pointing out, the flaws in their argument. And it doesn't matter because whether I disagree with you so much. It matters what other people who are, we were talking to an earlier caller about, people from their own religion, or from, when people from a religious perspective have a different opinion to other people within that same religion. And that's really important to bear in mind when we're doing these shows, is that when we get these callers that are throwing out really bad arguments, and we have a regular one on here who does it quite often, when we have callers who are throwing out these bad arguments, that there are other people from their religious background who are watching these shows and while listening to them. And when we challenge them, they get to listen to both sides of the story. And very often, and I know this for a fact because I have had these people contact me and tell me this, we get religious people saying, thank you for breaking it down, because that's actually given me a different perspective. I would have been in the same shoes as this, as that call, making these bad arguments, but having listened to both sides of the conversation, I've now got a different viewpoint to it. So I think it's important to bear that in mind, that we have an audience when we're doing it. Talking to Presumpt in general, I think, is difficult. It really, really is. And I totally get where you're coming from. And it can seem pointless. If you come from the perspective of, well, I'm going to start with my worldview and you've got your worldview, these conversations can be non-starters, and you cannot be having a conversation for half an hour and get nowhere, because you're constantly trying to say, well, this worldview against your worldview. And it's why these people always lead with worldview comparisons. You will notice that they always lead with worldview comparisons. And it's why when I have a conversation with them, what I try and do is break that down. And what I talk about is reality what is reality? What is a reality that we can agree on? Now, let's take that shared reality.
And so,
carry on, please.
So I feel, but like the thing that always gets me, and this is like that right there is like, that's often the approach that hosts tend to take is like, well, what is real, what is not? And as far as I've noticed, pre-suppers always basically like, if they can't defend the reality, it always just goes back to hard solipsism. Like, can you prove you're not a brain in a vat? And it's like, like, well, no, I can't, but like, that doesn't mean that I suddenly have to assume this thing. And I did want to go back to one thing that Godless Engineer mentioned was like, oh, Occam's razor, you know, the simplest thing. Well, Occam's razor is a part of logic. And how do you know that, you know, that like Occam, you can't use Occam's razor without God, who is the thing that gives us Occam's razor. And it's always like, and the thing I notice is, or at least the thing I never notice, I never notice hosts point out that like, you know, you are like, hey, you person who is a pre-supper, you have all the same axioms as I do. You've just tacked on an axiom. It's not, this axiom doesn't do anything for you. It doesn't give you any explanatory value.
Yeah, that is exactly what I was...
It seems to go down the reality.
Connor, that is exactly what I was going to say. Is when we talk about a shared reality, I'm not talking about like... when we do this, I'm trying to avoid this very thing of saying I have this axiomic belief and you have this axiomic belief and they're different worldview comparisons. Let's start with the things that we agree on. This is what I mean by shared reality. So we start with the shared reality. We start with the things we do agree on. We do have axiomic beliefs on that we agree exist in or as reality. And from there, what we do is we then look at what John was saying, those extra suppositions, so those extra layers. So we agree on all of these things that exist, that are real. This is our starting point. Now let's look at additional claims. Let's look at those additional claims, because what that does is it avoids falling back to this presupposition, well, God gives you this. Well, if you're just going to insist God gives you that, then we don't need to have this conversation at all. It's pointless because we're going to be talking about nothing for half an hour. Goodbye. But let's talk about the things we do agree on. Let's talk about the things we do agree are real and build from there. It's a really, really important method. And I may be condensing it too much to be like really understandable here because it's, you know, I've really wrote a lot on this subject before about subject to reality and all that kind of stuff. It's really, really interesting, but it takes a lot to get through. But yeah, basically what we need to do, and J-Mike does it in a really, really good way as well. J-Mike says, look, you're saying that this is our starting point, that God is our starting point, but how are you getting to God? And that's essentially what I'm saying. It's the same thing. It's just phrased in a different way. We have a shared reality we agree with, we agree all these things in reality are real. Let's look at those additional claims. And because what presuppositionalists do, by definition, is they presuppose something exists and they never, ever show their working out. They take it as axiomic. Now, you need to show the working out. Show your work. If you don't show your work, then there's no point in having the conversation. And it is so important to get that across. And it's why people like Darth Dawkins, who you mentioned earlier, I won't even entertain him. I've no interest in talking to that person whatsoever because, you know, and he has tried to talk to me, but I just simply won't talk to him because he doesn't want a conversation. What he wants to do is throw verbal garbage out and try and prove himself right. That's all he wants to do. I'm right. Well, that's fantastic. Go and fucking suck on an orange. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in people who want genuine conversations, who want to explore these subjects genuinely. And, you know, I've had great conversations. I've had conversations with people who have degrees in philosophy, you know, both online and my peers who are into this stuff, who are religious. And I've had fantastic conversations because we're both interested in having an honest conversation. And if you want an honest conversation, whether you're a Presumpt or not, then we can find common ground. But when you're talking to kind of online internet personality Presumpts, don't even bother. That's not even worth having that conversation from my mind. Yeah, please respond, and then I'll let John jump in.
And I was going to say, I suppose that's kind of the heart of what I was getting at is like, Darth Dawkins is the most obvious example, but it feels like, especially with like the talk shows, and earlier you said like talk shows are mostly about the audience, which I 100% agree. It's just, I guess I look at it as like, like you said, you want to take them down this path of let's see what we can hash out and what's real and like what can we agree on. Let's not talk about the axiology bit of it because it's just whatever. Let's talk about what we agree on. But I feel like, at least for me, at the point where someone's calling into one of these shows with presuppositional apologetics instead of some other thing, they don't want to have a conversation about that. They want to have the Darth Dawkins, I'm right. And I feel like instead of taking 30 minutes to try to go down this lane of, well, what do we agree on? And then they're just like, oh, well, could you prove hard solipsism? No, well, go suck an egg. Like, why? Like, I guess it just feels like that 30-minute segment could be cut down to like a 10 or even 5-minute segment of, okay, so like you have these axioms, I have these axioms. You just have an unproven axiom that you are saying is essential to all thought. And anytime I bring up any of the other axioms, you just say, you can't have that axiom without this axiom. I disagree. You disagree. We're not going to get anywhere. For all the people watching, this is what presuppositional apologetics is.
Connor, the difficulty is that we all start from axioms. All of us. Everybody starts from axioms. And it's very difficult you can't just kind of out of hand, I don't think anyway, dismiss out of hand an axiom without challenging it. You can't just kind of do that. If someone's going to the hard solipsism thing, which they have to do if they are in the, these kinds of people we're talking about, they'll say, well, how do you know you're not a brain in a vat? I don't. But, and this is vitally important, you share your opinion, that opinion with me. You don't think we're a brain in a vat either. And I know this for a fact, because if you genuinely believed you were a brain in a vat, you wouldn't spend time eating or drinking or having stupid philosophical conversations with an aspect of yourself on a made-up internet that is an aspect of yourself. So just fucking throw that out of the ballpark altogether. We don't need to talk about brain in vats because we're starting from a position, both of us, that we exist. So let's talk about the reality that appears to be the case in which we exist. That is where we're starting from. And if you're going to come with, well, what about, if we're all brains in vats, cool, wonderful. You're contradicting your own belief if you genuinely believe that by having a conversation with an aspect of yourself. What's the point? You're wasting your time. I don't exist, so it doesn't matter to me, mate. John, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. So whenever I'm having a conversation, like, I typically won't have a conversation with a Presumpt like on a private, one-on-one kind of level. The only time that I would actually have a conversation with a Presumpt is if it were like for some kind of content, either like a call-in show or like on like a TikTok live or something like that. But that's because I know I really value people that engage those types of arguments, and because then I can understand how to respond to those arguments, or like why those arguments don't make sense or why they shouldn't make sense. And so like that just gives me the ability to actually understand, why I'm not convinced by those arguments or why I should be convinced by those arguments. So, I mean, that's where the value that I see it coming in at is the diving deep into these conversations, even with presuppositionalists, that might get you into a certain area of argumentation that a lot of people either are encountering, and they need to know how to respond to it, or they haven't encountered it yet and they may need to know about it in the future. I just feel like it's a great way to arm people that are watching your content because they genuinely want to understand like why theists are wrong about these things, or why one side is wrong and the other side is right. So that's where I kind of focus my conversation, or at least the value of the conversation at.
And I do want to say, I'm not dismissing their axiom. I'm not saying like your axiom is just wrong, or saying like you can't have that axiom, because that's basically what they're saying. You can't have the non-axiom of my God. I don't want to say that I'm like dismissing their axiom. It's more so, it feels like not enough focus is like, or not enough of the spotlight is put on the fact that that is what the argument is. It is, I have an extra axiom that you do not have. You have to have that axiom. And it's, like, I feel like I agree, like learning to combat these people is, combat that like that idea is important. But I feel like I guess for me, the way I look at it, the best way to go about that would be like, you shine the spotlight on what it is. It is just an extra axiom. It is playing tag, but you are always it. I'm never it. If you touch me, I touched you back. You didn't feel it, but you're it. It's like, I'm not saying that axiom is wrong. It's not wrong necessarily to say all this stuff, but that they're saying, and it makes sense in a way. Not really, but in a way. But it's not. I guess the lesson to the people who watch it, as far as I'm concerned, the only reason those videos are 30 minutes long are as a warning to anybody else to not fucking talk about them.
That's fair. That's fair enough. And look, I think I'm going to have to let you go in a minute because we do have more calls we have to get to, and we are already over time.
Absolutely.
The thing is this. Look, if in all honesty, if I didn't do this as something that I do in day-to-day life, I probably wouldn't talk to Presumpt either. And sometimes you have to grab the bull by the horns, and I think Presumpt are those sets of people that they thrive on being in control of the call. And if you're going to talk to them, don't let them control the call. Don't let them control the conversation. Say to them, look, we're going to put this aside, and we're going to put this aside, and we're going to put this aside. So there's no point even going there. If we're going to have the conversation, we're going to have it honestly, and we're going to have it on an even keel. And I think most genuine Presupts, genuine like academic Presupts, the people I tend to talk to on this stuff, are absolutely fine with that. Like I say, it's the internet celebrity ones that want to make a name for themselves by, taking down the atheists that aren't. And fuck those guys anyway. Who cares what they think? Because I don't. And on that note, thanks, Connor, for your call. I am going to let you go. We do have other callers I'm going to take, but we do have another super chat. Where are we? Oh, we are getting there. Truth666, a member for 1 year, sent $10 and says, when does a human life logically begin? At conception or at first breath? Interesting question. Give the show a call next week and let's have the conversation. Jimmy Jr., member for 6 months, $4.99. Thank you, Jimmy. Says, hey, Richard, and hey, fat fuck with a PH. I apologize, Godless Engineer, if people start calling you a fat fuck.
No. Do it.
Please, it says, please spell it with a PH if you do. In fact, change your name. That would be sick. Hail Satan. And Nero sent $10 and says, Boltzmann brains, total solipsism are just party trick hypotheticals of their respective fields. The conclusions necessitate that the logical foundations they are built upon are assumed and worthless. We are 5 out of 10 for the Super Chat Challenge, people. If you want to see John challenge Jesus through his puppet, we need 5 more $10 Super Chats. Just saying. Let's have a look. I'm going to take Troy next. We do have 2 calls left. I'm going to try and get to both of them, so stay on the line. And Troy wants to know if the escalate. Hello. Do you tell us what you want to talk about?
Hi, I was just wanting to talk about the end times prophecies. I grew up a Presbyterian, and I knew some JWs and some Pentecostals, but I met my first real-life Seventh-day Adventist not very long ago. And I understand, like, Jehovah's Witnesses eschatology, but these Seventh-day Adventist guys seem to think that they're just, like, the world's going to end, like, later this week or maybe before dinner. And I just wanted to know where, I mean, I understand with JWs, it's the governing body. They tell you what it is, and that's what it is. But where Seventh-day Adventists are technically a Protestant thing, and they're like the 12th biggest Protestant faction in America. So where do they get the eschatology that, like, you know, me reading the Bible as a Protestant, I'm thinking Jesus never came into the apostles' lifetimes that he said he was going to. So 2,000 years later, I'm not really holding my breath.
Well, yeah.
Where do these guys get this idea that it's going to be over?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure where they're getting this from. The only thing that I can think of is that, like, you know, they're really hanging up on the whole, we don't know the time, the day or the hour in which, you know, it's going to come, or, you know, it's going to come like a thief in the night and all this other stuff. So I don't know if it's just preparing or just like preparing them to think, oh, it could be anytime. It could be later this week. Just like, it's definitely portrayed as an immediate thing, like in the Bible. And so I think that for their purposes, like always acting like it is upon them, like it could happen directly after dinner, it could happen later this week, it could happen next year. Like, it just throws a bit of uncertainty into the mix. And I feel like that's part of the whole fear mongering thing. They're trying to get people to fear it so that they, you know, cling and hold on to the faith better.
Terror management theory.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds right.
It's really interesting to me. Because
I know Forrest talks about that all the time, where people read about this stuff in the book, and then they have to figure out how to square that circle with the life they're living today. But I mean, how many generations are going to go by where it's like, stay alive till 65 before everyone's like, you know what, if Jesus comes back, that'd be great, but I'm not holding my breath anymore.
How many people have predicted it to have come, and the time has been and gone, nothing's happened. Eschatology literally means the study of the last. That's the kind of the literal translation from the Greek. And it's amazing how many of these people who profess the end times don't actually seem to have done any study whatsoever. One thing I see and challenge a lot, especially on that wonderful social media platform called TikTok, is these which, if you want, if it is like a kind of a shitty ladder rung above X, is you get this kind of this idea that you get all these videos made saying Jesus is coming, and this is the important part, Jesus is coming back soon. And I always ask the same question when I see that. What do you mean by soon? Because when you're saying the word soon, you are talking as if you have a quantified period in mind. And without exception, when I have asked this question, without exception, if I do get an answer, the answer is, well, we don't know the exact date and the time. We're told that we're not to know. So why the fuck are you using soon then? Why are you using that word? Yeah. Because that gives soon is the indication of a quantity. Sorry, go on, please.
I'm sorry, soon just seems very disingenuous. I'm currently sitting here with a copy of the New World Translation Jehovah's Witness Bible, right? And they can tell me all about what was going on in Mesopotamia in 2,000 years ago. I've got a whole Hebrew calendar here. And Jesus is still right around the corner, and I just don't get it. Like, is there really, I mean, you have Seventh-day Adventists, you have Jehovah's Witnesses, you have some flavors of Pentecostal and some flavors of, like, these new charismatic, prophecy churches. Like, how many times can you count the hits and not the misses? I mean, like, how many times? I just don't understand if there's like, I wonder if there was a verse in a chapter and verse that's like, yep, this is when it's going to happen, other than the whole I'll be back before you're dead thing that Jesus said.
Yeah, it's everything there has pretty much just been like very, we don't know when it's going to happen. Like not even Jesus knows the day, and even he's supposed to be, all knowing and everything about it. But yeah, the Bible doesn't give specific dates, but I mean, I feel like that's probably why they're continuously like the end is coming. They also identify common events in the socio-political environment to adhere to the coming signs of it. I mean, you've got, who was it? Like Pastor Hagee, I think maybe, who was spouting a whole bunch of like end time stuff whenever that red moon was with the blood moon, I think it is, when that was going to be showing up and talking about end time. So, I mean, it's literally like fear mongering, this very religious base, trying to convince them that, they are going to be experiencing the end times. And they either are grifting or they're just totally believing it. So like they truly believe in this. They truly believe that the end times are coming. And so they're doing their best to like warn people. But at the same time, like, I get what you're saying. Like, how many times can you actually expect them to buy this whole end times are coming thing? And I think that it's as long as people are holding on to this idea of the end times coming or the end of the world coming, which seems to have been forever, that people have held on to these kinds of things. I think they will continue to hold on to those things.
It's improbable. Like every single time they've said it was going to end, it hasn't ended yet. So currently we're batting zero here.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
And that thing that
I listen to a lot of Owen Morgan's content, and he deals with all these crazy prophets that are talking about like the Great Controversy, and I didn't realize how far deep that rabbit hole went in an actual sect like Seventh-day Adventists that are really technically like pretty popular Protestant group around America. I live in the Midwest, and I didn't realize how hardcore they were into how bad it's going to end. And I'm like, damn, dude, that must just stress you out all day long.
Yeah, I think it's important as well just to kind of touch on what Godless Engineer said with the signs thing. There are signs is in the same kind of category of vagueness as the word soon. And one thing they mentioned specifically was the blood moon, the moon turn into blood. And you see these kind of and for the Christians who believe this, who are watching now, I need to spell this out for you. You see these posts put up, and these, these things said that the moon is turning to blood exactly as it was prophesied in the Bible. Let me spell out to you what is actually happening. Okay, so the moon isn't turning to blood. In small areas of the moon, they have found that oxidization takes place in very, very small areas. So it appears that small areas on the moon are turning red. That's it. That's what the scientists have actually found. So if you see anybody saying that scientists
Like
have
ferrous oxide,
confirmed
like
that the
rust?
moon is turning to blood. Please dismiss them out of hand. Sorry, Troy. Go on.
I'm sorry, like ferrous oxide, like rust?
Apparently so, yes. Apparently it has been detected on the moon in very, very small amounts. But on that note, we are going to have to let you go. I'm going to ask my geologist friend, who is not a million miles away, about that very, very shortly. Thank you for your call, Troy. We lost our other caller. It isn't a fucking shame because it was Jackie, so nobody's going to be disappointed. I'll be honest with you. Thank you for those calls. We have had some great calls. I think we've got some more super chats. And the super chat progress is 10 out of 10. So I will be waiting for Godless Engineer while he prepares himself to channel Jesus through his puppet. I'm going to read out the rest of these super chats. Some kind of dickhead, a member for 2 months. And one of our wonderful hosts, no less, has sent $10 saying, Haley, Marionette, bring on Puppet Jesus, King of Strings. David Haxo, member for 6 months, has sent us $14.09. What's CA mean? I don't know what that means. It says CA 14.09. I don't know if that's a normal Canadian. I've got it. See, this brain's not as slow as it first appears. Canadian dollars, 14.09. Thank you very much. I don't know the difference between them and American money, so it's all the same to me. We need 3 more super chats, people. And David Axo, helping himself out, no less, a member of 6 months, sends another Canadian dollars, 14.09, saying, could you imagine being a lifelong Christian and then die suddenly without asking for forgiveness and spending eternity in hell while Jeffrey Dahmer is in heaven? And another super chat from David Haxo. Thank you very much, David Haxo. Sent another 14.09 Canadian and says, Jesus gonna lick you with his sword tongue. Revelations 19:15. I'm sold. Miranda Rensberger, a member for 6 months, sent $20 and says, every time someone calculates the date of the rapture, God says, me damn it, those little shits keep figuring out the day and the hour. I'm going to have to reschedule the rapture again. And I already booked the trumpeters. Thank you all for your super chats. I am going to pass it over to Godless Engineer, who is going to channel Jesus through his puppet.
Yes, I would really appreciate it if people didn't figure out when I'm going to be coming back. Because, I've got to reschedule that shit every single time, okay? And yes, I do have a sword tongue. See, I mean, it doesn't look like a sword now, but it's a lot like the Eucharist. It turns into a sword as soon as I lick you. So it's sharp like a cat, Anyways, God bless all of you. And I guess I'll be taking the next call or something until they tell me to get away from them or something. I don't know. Bless all of you, and I hope Christ will be upon you.
Thank you for that disarmingly scary display. Godless Engineer. J Mike is in the comments, by the way, making reference to you having a puppet of him. I don't know if it's some kind of weird sexual fetish you've got about J Mike, but he is there, and no, with the receding hairline, no less. I
don't know this J Mike character, but he sounds lovely.
Oh, stop telling lies now. Only kidding. We all love J Mike here and his weird pizza fetishes. Right, so the prompt for this week is, without lying, market the Bible to drive sales, reply in the comments, and tune in at the beginning of next week's episode to hear the top 3 answers. And we want to thank Kelly for helping us out today. Let's bring Kelly up here. Kelly, can the moon rust? Can oxidization take place? Yes, thank you.
Yes, there is iron on the moon, and there is also oxygen on the moon. So you're not going to get vast amounts of rust happening, but yeah, it can happen in isolated places.
Thank you for that.
Kelly, I have to disagree. We all know that the moon is a light and the source is me. Okay. I wrote it in my book. The source is a light. I'm just saying right now. Okay. Nobody except this harlot over here is being any kind of truth.
I expected him to go off. I didn't expect him to go off this fucking much. Kelly, what did you think of the show?
I was going to make a joke about cheese, but I didn't want to make it around a fat fuck.
You know what, Kelly? I'm gonna smite you for that. I'm smiting you right now. Okay.
Kelly, what did you think of the show? Let's bring it back in line.
Oh, it was. I enjoyed the show. I really did. And Stephen, if you're going to designate a group of people as followers of Islam, and that's the reason why you're hating them, then yeah, it's okay to call it Islamophobia.
Cool.
As Jesus, agree.
Yeah, we have an ACD Discord, which all three of us people will be attending shortly after the show, after our debrief. So head on over to tiny.cc/ACD Discord. If you don't believe, this is your community, and we really, really do appreciate you being here. We've had some great calls from the community today, and I very much appreciate those people who want to ask questions, who are appreciative of what we do. And I really do enjoy when you guys call in, when you listen to the show week after week, and you take on board the conversations that we're having, and you put them into practice in your own lives, and you give us a call to tell us how that's going. I love that shit. So please do it. Don't feel put off by calling. Don't think, oh, I'm an atheist, I haven't really got anything to say. If you have gained something from watching the show, please do feel free to give us a call and let us know. Do appreciate those calls. If you do believe, if you're Muslims, if you're Islamists, we weren't defending you earlier. You are wrong. God doesn't exist. However, nobody has the right to be abusive towards you, to denigrate you just because of that aspect of your personality. You are welcome here too. Religious people are welcome in this community. Let's have good conversations. We are here for everybody. And on that note, we don't hate you. We're just not convinced.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.